Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 78. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Monday. Steelers Nation Wildcard Weekend, mostly in the books. One final game tonight, but things on the AFC side are settled. And of course, they do not include the Pittsburgh Steelers following their 28-14 wildcard loss to the Ravens on Saturday night. No, Dave and I covered a lot of our initial thoughts on the Sunday show. You guys can check out. We'll continue that conversation. A couple other things on the table for today. So, Dave, how you doing 2 days after this season-ending loss?
Yeah, still, yesterday obviously real depressing when you look at Twitter, and we didn't help the matter probably with our show on Sunday, on top of it Sunday morning there, but it's the finality of things at this point. You're trying to compartmentalize. No.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, compartmentalize.
There you go. Big words are tough on me, especially only on my third cup of coffee here. Everything that happened during the, from really start of last offseason into free agency and on in through training camp and preseason and into the start of, the first, major stretch of the season before the bye week there. And then obviously the final, 4 games on into the playoffs there, and try to rewind as much of that into your head as possible, along with what going through some of the all 22 from the game the other night there, and paying attention to the wild card games that happened, before and after the Steelers game. Where are you at as far as these games went yesterday? Hey, how shocked were you? Bills blew out the Broncos after the Broncos looked like they were going to jump on this and make it a game early on, and obviously the Eagles kind of easily took care of the Packers overall, and then you had the Commanders with a rookie quarterback going to Tampa Bay and winning. And I thought Jaden Daniels did a really good job in that game overall. So where are you specifically in the final 4, I guess, if you will, the AFC side?
Of the AFC side, I mean, it's going to be, that Bills Ravens game next weekend is going to be just, what a matchup that one's going to be for both sides in that one. And of course, you'll have Kansas City and Houston. I don't know if I've really compiled any true thoughts. I give Houston a lot of credit. No one was really considering them and giving them a chance to beat the Chargers in this one, and they were able to kind of rebound after a tough end of the season. And if you have a quarterback and you have a pass rush, you can compete. And Houston showed that with the way they got pressure and the job that overall C.J. Stroud has done after a sophomore slump, or a little bit of a regression, and receivers getting hurt certainly haven't helped in that fact. But I think you have 4 really quality teams overall. I think you have the 3 teams you thought would be there. Obviously, KC getting the bye, Buffalo and Baltimore, and so it's really going to be a best of the best and truly earned the rest of the way.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the Ravens game against the Bills. That should definitely be a good one there. All right, what direction? Where should we kind of pick up where we left off the other day here, beating down Mike Tomlin and the Steelers?
Well, let's start with the one piece of news that came out. This is from the Post-Gazette's Jerry Dulac. Adam Schefter had said similar earlier in the day, but it was a little more of a continuation and a bit more focusing on the trade aspect of Mike Tomlin. But all reporting, including from Dulac, saying that the team is not planning, has no consideration to move on from Mike Tomlin in any capacity. No fire, no trade. He'll be the Steelers head coach come 2025, which, as we talked about, despite the case against Mike Tomlin and the continued disappointing showings of this Pittsburgh Steelers team as their playoff drought extends, now officially tied for the longest in the NFL, and Washington did not match that with their win off the doink yesterday. Mike Tomlin will be the head coach in 2025. Now, Dulac says the coaching changes elsewhere are likely and to be expected, which again, we also discussed and no one will be surprised by. But Mike Tomlin, barring something unforeseen, will be this team's head coach next season.
What did you make about late last night? Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk kind of parsing out, what kind of what Jerry Dulac had said, and to the point of kind of getting to a Mike Tomlin trade is possible, but it's not likely. In other words, he's kind of saying, well, interesting choice of words, saying they're not planning on, being making a coaching change. Is this the Steelers leaking stuff out, hoping that they would get trade offers for Mike Tomlin, who reportedly has a no trade clause in his contract, and all like that? Is this just Mike Florio being Mike Florio? In other words, if the Steelers were going to move on from Mike Tomlin, they would just move on from Mike Tomlin. They wouldn't sit around and play games and try to get somebody to trade for Mike Tomlin.
Yeah, this is just Florio being Florio. No one loves talking about coaching trades more than him. He's the one that kind of started the whole Kyle Shanahan, could he be traded, speculation and rumors that still kind of exist, but have largely quieted down and been addressed by the team. So, I mean, I think Dulac's report was pretty flat, pretty standard fare in terms of how you frame it. You always leave yourself a little bit of wiggle room there, because you never can predict the future as the reporter to say they're not planning on it. But I mean, no, if there was going to be any sort of couching to try to leave the door open for a trade, you would have a different kind of reporting where the team doesn't have any desire to trade Tomlin, but they'll leave the door open. They'll always listen to calls. Something like that would come out if you really wanted to try to smoke signal teams about potentially, considering a trade. And that's not the case here. Pittsburgh, I don't think, has any interest in any desire to do that. And so this is just tin hat Florio.
So here we are, not even 48 hours removed from the game, and kind of what we thought, would transpire or wouldn't transpire, I guess, so to speak, when it comes to Mike Tomlin and his future here at this point. It will be interesting to hear Art Rooney II talk later, this month, especially 1 year removed from basically saying it's getting tiring, not at least winning a playoff game. And I think kind of piggybacking on what all we had to say, in the Sunday morning show there, I guess a bigger question at this point could be, is this potentially the beginning of the end for Mike Tomlin, or was the beginning of the end for Mike Tomlin last year? Look, if the Flames obviously are going to get hotter at this point. I mean, we've gotten to the point where, man, just give us one playoff victory. It's no longer talk about Super Bowl and all like that. I think in so many words you kind of wrote a post about that, did you not? About this is what this has become. Just get a playoff victory, and it's hard to deny that when you look at the current shape of this roster right now and the things that you kind of think will and won't transpire over the course of this offseason, that's the short, long range goal, at least right now. So where I'm going with this is, what happens if 1 year from now we're still talking about Mike Tomlin, unable to get a playoff win?
Well, to answer both parts of that, my article today was on the new Steelers standard, and it's not even win a playoff game. Standard is you are what you repeat, what you often consistently attain. And what Pittsburgh is doing is getting into the playoffs with a slightly above average caliber team and then getting bounced in the first round. That has become the new standard, the new consistency, the new expectation for this team. And you felt that even going into this game, where Pittsburgh, there was that large sense, and obviously because of the way they were backsliding and facing a red hot Baltimore team, that they would be one and done. There was more optimism, I think, for the Bills game last year than there was for this game against Baltimore from the collective fan base. So that is the unfortunate new standard that I wrote about this morning. Now, to your other question about what will things look like a year from now, I don't know. I mean, it's impossible to really predict, and I'm not really putting myself in those shoes. But I'll just say this: that for all the obviously all the surge of feelings and chatter and desire from the fan base about wanting the team to fire Tomlin, only one man's vote and opinion matters here, and that's Art Rooney. And if he doesn't want to make a change, and clearly he's resistant to making a change, then I don't know if it will change a year from now, especially again that extension runs through, what is it, 2027, 2026. And so, you know, I think if a change were to happen, it wouldn't happen until around then.
Where during this season was your optimism about this team the highest? And at any given point, even though prior to the season, neither one of us had this team obviously winning a playoff game. I didn't even have them getting into playoffs, but you did. But having had them taking a first round, wild card exit, at what point was your optimism about this team the highest? And at any point did was there a point where you think, well, maybe this team can win a playoff game?
Yeah, I would say it was around that first Ravens game. You beat the Commanders in week 10. You beat the Ravens, in week 11. And I forget exactly what Pittsburgh's record was at that point. Probably 9-win team, whatever it was. And you felt like, okay, they just beat two quality teams. One, I think, Washington, I believe, on the road. And so, yeah, I thought they could win a playoff game. I don't know if I really bought the Super Bowl hype the way that others did, the way that some of the media began framing Pittsburgh. But you felt like, okay, this is a team that is capable to win a playoff game, and you would feel confident that they could win at least one playoff game, get to the divisional round with that offense and team that at one point was top 10 in scoring and top 5 in scoring defense, a recipe for success.
And remember, it wasn't too long ago we were entertaining the talk of potentially Mike Tomlin winning Coach of the Year, were we not? I mean,
sure, he was one of the favorites.
If you got into what week was it where they needed to beat? The last week, right? Beating the Bengals, potentially winning the division, right?
In which week?
Wasn't that the final week?
Week 18?
Right.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess by kickoff, I mean, the division was lost, but yeah, I don't know if there was a lot of momentum for Tomlin Coach of the Year then. I think it pretty much faded once that losing streak began.
Okay. I mean, but we were talking about, but there were qualifiers though that for Mike Tomlin to win Coach of the Year or be in serious consideration, he had to win the division, right?
Sure. And even if he would have won it in week 18 with the way, if things would have broke perfectly, I don't think he still would have even been close for Coach of the Year at that point. It would have been, had they beat Baltimore in week 16.
That's the game I'm trying to rewind back to, week 16. If in week 16, that's when it was there, because you could have put Baltimore away right there. You could have got the hat and t-shirts after the week 16 game with Baltimore right there. So had they won that game, which obviously would have meant sweeping Baltimore for the 2024 season, obviously you don't know how the seedings and all would have worked from that point forward there, but we both agreed though that it would have taken him winning the AFC North for him to be in Coach of the Year discussion. Had he done, and this is all going down the hypothetical road now at this point, but had this team won the AFC North and still took a first a wild card exit, we'd still be having the same conversations, right?
Sure, and that was one of my points during the losing streak, as ugly as it was. I said the playoffs were defining because even if you had run the table and beat everybody, the Ravens, the Chiefs, et cetera, got in the playoff, let's just say hypothetically they weren't the 1 seed, they were playing wild card week and they lost, then you have the same conversation. So the playoffs really define, because again, the measure of progress is supposed to be winning a playoff game, getting to round two, and that's going to be the goal. Pittsburgh can have enough regular season success to be in the hunt to compete and to make the postseason. They've shown they're able to do that basically under any set of circumstances, no matter how the roster looks. It is the power of Mike Tomlin, but getting to the playoffs is that brick wall that hump that Pittsburgh still cannot get over. And again, it goes back to what I wrote about this morning, the standard dropping. This is a wild card team. They've not won a division since 2020. It's their longest drought since the mid-late 80s, early 90s, where they won a 7-year stretch not winning the division. It's their longest postseason drought in terms of not winning a game post-merger, et cetera, et cetera. It's the longest active playoff losing streak. And so those are the things that are now becoming the standard, the repeated outcomes of this organization.
When the schedule was released way back during the offseason, and looking at what we thought this team could be, and talking about how all right, the first half and a little past that are games that the Steelers really need to make hay in. I remember us talking specifically about that because it obviously did get tougher in that second half. Had that AFC North run of consecutive games, and then ending it towards the end there, obviously with having to play on Christmas against the Chiefs, and then the Eagles, and then obviously winding it down, Baltimore in there one more time, and then ending the season with Cincinnati there. Was this season always going to probably be defined by these final 4 games, and then ultimately the first playoff game, assuming they made it? I mean, is that looking back now at this point, both before the season started and now after the season is ended, is this last string of 5 games in which the Steelers went 0-5 in what defines this season and Mike Tomlin?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so, including the playoffs in there. Sure. It's always impossible to predict, when a season gets released in May, what a team and what the landscape of the NFL will look like in week 17. But you had a good feeling Baltimore would be a competitive team. The Chiefs would be a competitive team. The Eagles would be a competitive team. And then you're playing a divisional opponent to wrap things up. So, yeah, those things were always going to be likely in safe assumptions as you could make about a schedule looking at it in May, about what it would look like come January.
Did you think before the season started you would be feeling and say some of the things that you and we said in the Sunday morning podcast about Mike Tomlin before the season started? And if things played out exactly kind of the way you thought they would, which, I mean, let's face it, you said they'd go 10-7, you said they'd get in the playoffs, but they wouldn't win a playoff game. Would you envision having the same thoughts and words about Mike Tomlin and his immediate future now that things have played out like you thought they would play out?
I mean, I didn't spend a lot of time. I didn't spend a lot of time pondering those things, but you understand the weight of this team's lack of playoff success. And the longer this streak extends, the more bricks that get added to that in your backpack, and the heavier that load is to carry. And so I think just intuitively, you can talk about for next year now, for the 2025 season, if this streak goes another year, then it's another brick that you have to carry around that becomes harder and heavier and more tiresome to wear. And so I think that just is baked into the cake of this drought. And that's why Pittsburgh has to break it to get that monkey off their back.
How would you define Mike Tomlin right now? What would you consider Mike Tomlin's strengths, and what would you consider Mike Tomlin's weaknesses?
I probably would need some time to try to write that down and flesh out some real more coherent thoughts. I mean, obviously, I do think in some ways he can get groups to, just largely speaking over his tenure, overachieve and play above expectations. I think about the 2019 version of that Steelers team, for example. There is an ability to connect with players that seems to be pretty unique. And from what players talk about, his level of transparency and honesty and the way that he's able to make that a motivating factor and something to his benefit seems to be pretty unusual for the coaching profession. I do think he's probably a better X's and O's guys than people give him credit for because he's just known as that, motivator, wordsmith, but this is still a smart guy that could have gone to law school, that he's obviously really, really experienced as a coach in different backgrounds, was a receiver growing up and has that perspective and, then mostly defensive side throughout his career. In terms of the weaknesses, I mean, obviously just being able to get over the hump, but that's less about, less tangible, I suppose, kind of just more of an outcome based thought there. I think some of the in-game clock management's been pretty rough over the years, challenges and those types of things. Yeah, I mean, there's probably some other weaknesses to discuss there. There is a reliance on gut over maybe some of the analytics and being less receptive to those things as well. That have also probably hurt him along the way, especially as the NFL has shifted pretty heavily towards analytics.
There's so many different holes you can go down here. Mike Tomlin is a master motivator. He does connect with his players well. I believe that. Does Mike Tomlin need to look at I think it goes without saying at this point he's a better motivator than he is a football coach, right? Or would you disagree with that?
I don't know if I'm qualified to really say that exactly. I mean, it's certainly what he's known for, and it probably is a trait that separates him more so than the coaching side. But I don't like to completely dismiss the coaching side either. I think it's probably too discrediting. I think probably some of that just doesn't get seen as often, and you won't see it on Hard Knocks because they're not going to allow X's and O's to get out there public airwaves, but they'll allow a Tomlin team meeting speech to be shown because it's less state secret.
Do you think he lets his coaches on his staff coach enough, have enough input? And obviously we don't know. I would pay to watch a week of preparation from all aspects, but we'll never get to see that part of it. Do you think he needs to take a hard look at how the team goes about preparing and practicing and schematics and everything related to the week involved preparing for a game?
Sure. I mean, anytime you're in this drought, like I said, organizationally, you have to look at everything culturally, structurally, how we approach everything. It all has to be on the table. And if the answers to any questions are we're doing this because it's the way we've always done things, then it's got to change. Do you think Tomlin, because we don't know exactly how things get delegated, but we know that Tomlin has a pretty good hold on this defense. Should he relax that control on this defense, if assuming that he has a good amount of control of that unit?
That we're back into kind of things too that we've talked about for numerous years. How heavy of fingerprints does Mike Tomlin have on the defense and even on almost a play-by-play calling? I mean, we've seen over the years the side, you see all these coaches with the big sheets, and you see Tomlin and the defensive coordinator with a note card, right? Mm-hmm. Are they just spinning the wheel, or I do wonder if he needs to head coach more and be decision making and let his coaches call, give them more autonomy, if you will, and let the coaches coach on maybe more of a play-by-play type situation, and him be the one that says, go for it, don't go for it, challenge, don't challenge, call timeout. You know what I'm saying?
Sure, that's a fair discussion to have too. Like I said, everything I think has to be on the table. If you do relax that maybe authority that Tomlin has, do you look to bring in, a different DC? I think one issue when you talk about, the discussion over firing Terrell Austin is, okay, what DC could you get? Because if you're not going to get a top candidate if Tomlin is essentially running or has his hands pretty heavy into this defense. You're not going to get one of those guys that could go somewhere else in a NFL where most head coaches are offensive minded and they control that side of the ball. And the DC has basically complete freedom to run his unit as he sees fit. And so that's one issue in terms of the discussion of replacing a Terrell Austin. How much does it really change? And can you attract a quality candidate who, knowing that they wouldn't have the control most organizations would give them?
You pointed out, I think, even a couple of fourth down situations. How much does that aggravate the stew out of you? And it's just not a one game situation where you see them go fourth down and, inconsistencies, I guess, in some of the decision making in key moments of games.
Well, that's the gut aspect of it from Tomlin, where he does it based off of how he's feeling in the moment, and there's always a middle ground. Analytics you can't look at a spreadsheet solely and that be your only determinative factor about will you go forward or what course of action will you take. But when you're a gut guy, your decisions are almost always inconsistent because your gut usually isn't just trending and pointing in one direction. But yeah, I tweeted that with the Ravens, they're up 28-14. They're going for it on fourth and half a yard from their 39. And Pittsburgh early in the game down 7-0, punts on fourth and literal inches from their 30. Two different styles of teams. Analytics. The Ravens are a very analytic forward team. They've been at the forefront of that for years now, and they lean into that. And the Ravens convert the Steelers punt, and the Ravens scored. And so that just kind of sums up where those two teams are at organizationally.
Which side of the football let this team down the most during these final 5 games, or is it a yes?
Yeah, I think it's a yes.
I thought the defense as a whole from start to bottom, I even said the way this team's going to win games throughout the season is keep it close. We talked about the points per game aspect of needing to rise. Where did that end up being? Let me get the rankings here. Remember us talking about, well, they need to get at least a points per game up at top, what do we say, top 15 or so?
I was expecting them to be an average defense. We were talking about from an offensive standpoint, 21, 22 points per game is kind of the hope. Maybe not the hope, but the minimum bar to hit to have some sort of satisfaction.
All right, and they hit as a team this year 22.4, but that still ranked them in the bottom half of the league.
Would that put him about right around 16? I mean, it was probably right around the midway mark, right?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
Okay, so smack dab in the middle. I mean, on paper, had you given that to us in our conversations in August, you may have signed up for that. But obviously, the way they got there by being held under 17 points in their last 5 games, including the playoffs, which has not happened since 1969. The stat so shocking, I had to look it up myself 3 times to double check my work, and I couldn't believe it. It's not just the number, but it's how you get there, which can define your season.
All right. I thought the defense should have been better, especially down the stretch.
Yeah, if you made me pick a side in terms of which side was more disappointing, I would say the defense, because there were those higher expectations. And while there were some injuries, there weren't anything critical, and they got healthy by the end. They were healthy for this playoff game, so there was no excuse there, but they didn't have any guys available to them. And just watching that defense just not play the way a Steelers defense should play, with the physicality, the edge, the intensity, the passion, and obviously the actual results in the play and being gap sound and, getting pressure and those types of things was really disappointing.
All right. Now that we at least think, you got anything? Here's the thing. If we don't spend enough time talking about Tomlin, I want to go which way. How much more do you think the listeners want us to talk about Mike Tomlin?
I don't know. It's a good question. I'm sure people will and have already chimed in, but I think it's okay to talk about for the first couple episodes and to continue to at least discuss in terms of what moves Tomlin does or does not make throughout this offseason. But obviously there's more components than just him, even though he is the biggest one.
Uh, which way would you advise this team to go now, assuming that Mike Tomlin uh is retained, which there's no evidence to the contrary there. Are you what changes would you suggest they make on the staff?
Yeah, I was going to ask your thoughts too, and I still want to take a little bit of time and kind of sit in it, but I think O-line coach is the one that I can certainly agree to off the top. We've talked about it for a little bit now. It's not a knee-jerk reaction to me. I can appreciate Pat Meyer. I appreciate his style as more quiet teacher than rah-rah yeller. There has been some individual growth, but collectively the group hasn't improved, and I don't think he's a particularly top offensive line coach in the NFL. I think this team probably needs that caliber guy to really get this offense to go. And especially given all they've invested in this offensive line, you want whatever, that should be your biggest hire this offseason is write a blank check to the best O-line coach you can possibly find out there on the market. They need that in the worst way. They've had so many missteps and misfires with their O-line coach hires we discussed yesterday, post Mike Munchak, from Surratt to Clem, which was a disaster, interim coach Chris Morgan to tabbing Pat Meyer. And so they really got to get that one right organizationally, get this offense going. Wonder about D-line coach too, Carl Dunbar. I've been a big fan of him for a long time, but you allow 299 on the ground to Baltimore in the playoffs. You wonder if changes might happen there as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Especially look here's the thing that at least this team got them back in a situation where they had the health back, because you went through games this season where you didn't have Larry Ogunjobi, you're without Montravius Adams, you're without Deshaun Elliott,
Jackson.
Porter missed a game. Jackson missed two, I think, was it, with the back. So yeah, you got those guys back there, and you had quote unquote technically a healthy bunch going into the playoffs. So there was that aspect of it that thought, especially when you look back and rewind back to the second meeting against the Ravens, and you're without several of those guys and all like that. So yeah, I think it's fair to include Carl Dunbar in that conversation. Yeah, without a doubt, I think they should take a hard look at Terrell Austin. This fan base is going to be absolutely livid if especially the ones that unequivocally think Mike Tomlin should be gone. If at least a guy like Terrell, they're going to be mad if Austin stays as well too. And I definitely think that's fair there. I think
let me ask you this about Austin. How much will it change, assuming that Tomlin, we know, that has some pretty heavy influence on this defense? And what would you say? Obviously, I understand the overall output, the losing streak, but what would you say Austin has done wrong with this defense, the coaching of it, to lead his dismissal?
It's impossible to answer that question knowing and not knowing all the aspects of who has hands on what, and
Sure.
how much input and how much say and how much on in prep for games. Look, there was just, I mean, you just look at the tape defensively in this game against the Ravens, and how, I mean, they just were not ready for, Mike Thomas says the familiarity factor, and it's not like they did not know aspects of what the Ravens were going to do with them. They knew it was the possibility of Lamar Jackson doing, zone read stuff. They obviously knew, you're going to get Derrick Henry off guard, off tackle, kind of things there. The Ravens did a good job addressing some of that stuff up. They did not do a good job in first down situations, particularly. The Ravens got a lot of third and short type situations where it became kind of gimme type situations there. Uh, for the familiarity that they have about this Ravens team that really has been kind of the same for the last several seasons here with their strengths, and really kind of punctuated by what Derrick Henry brought to that team. I mean, we've seen Ravens teams with quote unquote lesser quality running backs than Derrick Henry gouge them in the past, right?
But a lot of that was that to focus on Lamar and to take
right,
Lamar away, which they largely were doing at least.
right. But I mean, in this game, Lamar, they're out of gap on a lot of these plays.
Yeah, the issue was they didn't take away anybody in this game.
Right.
They were unprepared to play a familiar opponent, which I think is the point you're making, which is a certainly fair critique.
And I guess it goes back to how much input and coaching from each of Mike Tomlin and Terrell. If all Terrell Austin is a finger puppet, then it's not very fair to him. So it's hard to say if the next guy comes. And how likely is it that it would be within house if they do let go of Terrell Austin?
Well,
We're asking more questions than we're giving answers here.
Well, we're not in that building
because we don't know.
Right. I would like to think it's an out of house hire in the way that you've done some internal promotions at OC and you realized, okay, that's not getting the results we're looking for. Let's go out of house. Done some internal promotions at DC, going back to Keith Butler, replacing Dick LeBeau, and then Terrell Austin replacing Keith Butler. And so you would like an out of house hire, but obviously, again, you wonder on that side of the ball, the quality of candidate, like I don't think you're getting, and if they do, then fantastic. But I don't think you'd get a Robert Saleh to run your defense because knowing that Mike Tomlin has so much influence there, why would Saleh go to Pittsburgh instead of going to wherever, some team with an offensive head coach who's going to run that side of the ball and Saleh gets full control of the defense? Like, why would you ever want to go to a place where you're only working half as effectively as you could be? And that's a difficulty, I think, in a DC hire. I still like Terrell Austin. I know it's an unpopular opinion. I think there's been some good things overall. I think the turnover culture that he helped instill has been really, really important since he was hired in 19. No team has more takeaways than the Pittsburgh Steelers. No team has had more sacks than the Pittsburgh Steelers. Those numbers have come down the last 2 years. I do think schematically there's been some wrinkles, and they were able to at least clean up the communication issues despite them probably going on for too long. But obviously, the showing in this game was indefensible across the board.
What do you make about all the Brian Flores discourse at this point as well too? You don't. It's hard to know exactly what went behind closed doors. You read some stuff that says Flores didn't want to stay anyway. What do you believe and don't believe when it comes to Brian Flores and this team potentially making a change before he got out of town and making him to DC?
Yeah, I didn't really buy it at the time. My response to that would be, and you're right, we see this a lot at the time, and especially now about Flores. That was always going to be a 1-year thing. This was never supposed to be a long-term fit where Brian Flores stays in Pittsburgh for 5+ seasons. This was a 1-year lifeline to give him a job when the NFL had frozen him out, and that was likely all it was ever going to be. I'm not sure if the philosophy exactly fits in terms of what Flores does and Tomlin does either, with the aggressive blitz cover zero nature that Flores likes to work with. And frankly, he probably would have left soon after anyway to potentially become a head coach somewhere. So no, I know it's an easy response. I just don't pay much mind to it.
So you think that that nothing could have been done to potentially keep Flores in Pittsburgh as a DC? In other words, I guess after the first season that he was in there as an assistant and all, if they would have offered him the job then and let Austin go, you think there was close to zero chance of him be willing to take that?
I mean, I don't know for sure, but if you're Flores, again, you can go be the DC in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell, who's an offensive guy, right? And runs the offensive side, he coaches the quarterbacks. That's his background. And you can have full autonomy over that defense. or I can stay in Pittsburgh and half run this defense with Mike Tomlin. Which would you rather do? Like I said, I think it's hard to get an attractive top tier coordinator defensively because that job operates at 50% what the other jobs would around the league.
And look, if this team does move on from Terrell Austin, there's not really in-house. I mean, who the most probably qualified would be Grady Brown, right?
Likely, yeah. Good.
It wouldn't be Dunbar. I don't think. No. I don't think Curry's got enough experience yet to move in.
Well, maybe need some fresh ideas. I don't know. I mean, it's not a huge defensive coaching staff on that side of the ball. There's a limited pool of candidates. So
does that what you just said? Does that say something about this defense?
Well, I mean, I do each year annually, the last 3 years or so, a coaching staff size study to see who has the largest coaching staffs in football and who has the smallest in Pittsburgh. It has grown, but it is continually one of the smallest, if not the smallest coaching staffs in football. But I have found that there's not been a tremendous correlation between coaching staff size and team success. It is a little bit more the motion of the ocean than it is size of the boat kind of a thing in terms of how these results have been borne out. So again, you examine everything. It's all on the table, I think, assuming you keep Tomlin. I think every aspect of how this organization operates has to be viewed, but I wouldn't be my first thought in terms of the fixes to the team.
All right. Do you think Terrell Austin will be gone?
I really don't know. I'm pretty on the fence. If I had to guess right now, I will say he stays, but that's my guess. It's also worth pointing out, and again, this goes back to the precedent that you talked about, which I think is a fair thought. It sounds like Austin is under contract through 2025, and Pittsburgh very rarely fires coaches mid-contract. They prefer to let contracts expire and to do the whole non-renewal thing. I know Canada was an exception to that mid-season, but he was entering the last year of his contract. It's one reason why I think he came back for that 2023 season. So on that basis, not saying that that's justified, but partially on that basis as well, I think Austin stays.
All right. Look, I think Pat Meyer's time, and I kind of alluded to this towards the latter part of the season too. I think his time should be up in Pittsburgh. What do you think about the tight ends coach Alfredo Robertson, the job that he's done with his tight end group?
I think he should stay. I don't see anything in terms of you evaluate players. Is anyone being put in bad situations, which is more of a coordinator thing than a dispositional coach thing. But that, and is anyone not being developed properly, not being used as in a way that they should be and not reaching their potential. I think Washington showed tremendous growth this year. I think Pat was pretty steady, and Hayward improved. What can you really ask out of those guys? So I'm not sure what would be the case against, like, who is not playing well enough as they should under Alfredo Roberts.
Based on the talent he was given to work with.
Yeah. Is there anybody that's underachieving? Is there, like, what would be the case? Lay out the case against Alfredo Roberts.
I thought the swing with Darnell Washington was a little bit, he had good games, but I don't think that he's 100% developed into the guy that I thought he'd become.
He's still a second-year guy. I thought his blocking took a major step forward. His pass protection, which they asked a lot more out of him in pass pro this year under Arthur Smith. I thought that really grew in a lot of ways. So I've been happy with his development.
I thought the inconsistencies overall were not kind of what I was expecting. What about Eddie Faulkner as a running backs coach?
I like Faulkner, even if he went on that blocking spree when he became the interim OC, and we got caught up in that. At least I got caught up in that crossfire. I would keep Eddie Faulkner around.
So I guess what you're saying is you really, the topics of conversation might be Pat Meyer and Terrell Austin, because Arthur Smith's unlikely to go anywhere, right?
Yeah, I think Austin's a potential chopping block. I think for me, you look at the trenches, and that's where I'm kind of talking about. This team has to really find identity, and again, they want to be a physical team. They want to be a bully ball type of team. They're not showing that, and so you look at the trenches first. And so I think I hone in on personally Pat Meyer, Carl Dunbar, you can talk about Austin. That's fine. I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. They just brought in a whole host of coaches, so it's hard to go fire the whole coaching staff because you just offensively you brought in a new receivers coach, you brought in a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterbacks coach, and so it's hard to just go dump those guys after one single season. Defensively, there's probably some more continuity there. I still like the job. I thought Grady Brown was on the upswing. Maybe some of that stuff has cooled off. Aaron Curry and I thought the inside backers played pretty well this year. The development of Peyton Wilson, the play of Landon Roberts and Patrick Queen in year one in Pittsburgh. So you're going to go fire him. Like I said, it's a smaller coaching staff, and so maybe there's some assistant type stuff that's done. Maybe some more people just get added, more cooks in the kitchen. But for me, in terms of coaching changes, assuming that putting the Tomlin stuff aside, it's trench play. That's where it starts.
What do you imagine the conversation, wrap up conversation between Art Rooney and Mike Tomlin's like?
A lot like last year's, probably. I mean, how much has this franchise really truly changed? I mean, there has been a lot of roster turnover, but it's like I said, they're a stagnant, treading water organization. The standard is, and what you can expect and assume, and what you've been getting is about the same for the past 8 seasons, and slightly above average or average in some years, regular season team that gets in the playoffs, that kind of squeaks on in, wild card style, and then gets bounced in the first round. I mean, that's been their story for this entire time. And that's where the frustration and the angst is coming from internally, from inside that building. We could feel it when Art Rooney's words last year, and certainly feel it externally with the fan base.
Is it bad that we're going into another draft season now? We kind of lay out the things that over time, and is it bad that we have gotten so, I don't want to see great. Nobody's ever great at this stuff, but good at whittling down the note card to 25 players.
Oh, when it comes to who they're interested in,
right? Is that a good or a bad thing?
That's
because you talked on Sunday about kind of the culture and the kind of player that the Steelers look for, and that obviously through what we have done over the years, and tracking what this team does make it easier to some degree of figuring that out, right?
Sure, it does. There's also just, it's a little bit attributed to our obsession over some of these pro day type things and some of those dot connecting that we can do just from kind of the time we put into it. But yeah, I mean, maybe you examine that. I don't know about that, but again, I'm willing to look at everything. Let me ask you to ask you your own question about what coaching changes do you think are worth making? If you had to kind of create a list of names, offense and defense, what would that look like?
I would move on from Terrell Austin. I would seriously consider Dunbar, especially the way this team needs to get better in the trenches. I think Pat Meyer should be gone, and I think they do need to take a hard look at Alfredo Roberts as well too.
Okay, fair enough. So we will see. What about, do you add a special teams assistant? Remember, Pittsburgh, the only team in the NFL to not have a dedicated special teams assistant in title with Danny Smith. And you wonder, when will Smith retire? I know he's a football lifer and talks about no hobbies and all that kind of stuff. Not calling for the firing of Danny Smith, but you do wonder about getting a replacement for him, maybe in the building. And you do wonder about how much longer he'll coach as well.
I mean, I think Danny Smith is not the reason why this team bowed out, and had the final 5 games like they did. But I mean, special teams didn't make the kind of plays that we kind of thought, or the kind of plays that they had, the more impactful ones throughout the season. But I think if Danny Smith thinks he needs an assistant, fine, get him one. I don't think you can have too many coaches on a staff.
I think there's a risk of potentially messages getting muddied, but yeah, there's always pros and cons to the coaching staff size discussion in my mind.
I haven't given a lot of thought about an assistant for Danny Smith. I gotta be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's no one's top of list, nor is it mine in terms of how this organization starts getting fixed. But I do think it's interesting that Pittsburgh is the only team to not have a special teams assistant in title. Now, there are coaches that help Danny Smith. It's not like he's truly one man band out there in training camp. You see guys that come in and help. And, I think, I remember back to, Blaine Stewart, whenever he was in Pittsburgh, he would help out Danny Smith quite a bit. So it's not just him, but in title, Pittsburgh, the only team, and this has been true for several seasons, only team not to have at least one coach who has an assistant title next to the special teams coordinator.
I went through yesterday. I've been thinking because we talked a little bit about precedents and all like that organizationally, and I kind of jotted a few down, wondering that the team should examine, even though I know they probably won't. And here's a few of them that I wrote down. Fully guaranteed money past year one for non-top of market free agents at positions. Basically, what that means is it would help you attract. Don't be afraid to go after even a higher quality of free agent because of the guaranteed money aspect of it. Where do you come in on that?
Yeah, it's one of those big discussions we have anytime a big money contract comes up. And, that excludes you from a lot of those free agents that you could potentially otherwise target. And now that Pittsburgh isn't paying the quarterback and has some more money, they're in contention for some of those bigger names potentially. So yeah, I'm open to breaking that. I know that's such a long-standing precedent a team may really turn up their nose at, but I think it's one of those things you certainly have to consider dropping.
Let's see what else in here did I write about? The APY hierarchy concerning outsiders signed. You get past that top five list of kind of guys that have been around, and it always seems like this team is afraid to bring someone in from the outside to slot ahead of those guys. Is that whereas other teams are not afraid to go out there and sign that top outside free agent and slot him in at either number one or number two on the list?
Yeah, another one I fully endorse changing, probably more so than even the guaranteed money aspect. We're all gonna have to put on our big boy pants here and say, hey guys, you want to win? You tired of this one and done, not winning a playoff game? Teach you want. You tired of not having a playoff win? Cam Hayward, you tired of having one career playoff game, and that's the one mark on your resume, if your Hall of Fame resume, that you don't have is playoff success, then we're all gonna have to buck up here and deal with your slotting. Your money's still going to count just the same if we pay somebody else even more. You're not losing any money here. So yeah, I think it's one of those that has to be a must.
Because I mean, that's something that needs to be looked at that you don't see happen with a lot of organizations around a team, right? I mean, we can look at the top 5 or 6 guys and kind of say, yeah, they're probably not going to sign that free agent at that price because he would slot in there in that top 3, 4 APY hierarchy, right? I mean, that's not a myth.
Yeah, and it's just kind of almost self-created boogeyman. And I know, okay, first of all, explain why does this even exist in Pittsburgh in the first place? What is the Steelers' rationale in the past for being tried and true to not rocking the boat?
I mean, I don't know specifically, but I think it's just trying to show uh, loyalty to your guys, not wanting to hurt some feelings, so to speak, and upset the locker room where, damn, Cam Hayward's been here for all this time. He's the leader of the defense. He's the core of what this team does. He's the main cog on a defensive side of football. You're going to bring in some guy that you didn't even draft, and you're going to pay him more money than Cam Hayward at APY. What's he going to think about that when he sees it on over the cap?
Right. Yeah, that stuff's got to stop.
I'm kind of paraphrasing there, but
I think you're right though. They don't want to have that internal tension where somebody starts counting someone else's money.
Exactly. That's probably a better way to put it. So I think that's something that they should look at. What do you think about performance incentives? Bill Belichick was a lot of teams do it, but and probably because Bill Belichick was so prominent and had the success that he had, that guy was not afraid to put incentives in guys' contracts.
Yeah, this one I'm less maybe dogmatic on in terms of them getting rid of. I'm okay generally with Pittsburgh. Again, if they want to change, I'm opposed to most model changes to be clear, but this is one where I guess sit there and see the value of them not doing it. It makes the cap a little less predictable, and I could see where maybe it creates a little bit of potential stress and strain late in the season about trying to get a guy this, or we didn't get a guy that, and that creates an issue, that kind of stuff. So that one I'm a little more okay on Pittsburgh staying status quo on.
All right, I think they should look at it though, because anytime, and it's not a myth either. Anytime they get a guy that maybe they trade from the outside, they do their best to work those incentives out of the deal if they can. Who was the blocking tight? Vance
Yeah.
McDonald was a prime example of that, and I mean, there's been other instances over the years where the per game roster bonuses, if they get a guy from the outside, they try to work those out of there. I think even didn't they do something with Dante Jackson? I can't remember if he had per game or not, looking back. All right, what about extensions in season if worthy?
That's another one I'm okay with them keeping, to be honest. I'm okay with letting seasons play out. At worst, you have to pay a guy who had a good season more, which I'm never going to feel too upset about overall. I do like having the self-imposed deadline of the end of the summer to try to help spur some of these deals to happen. So I actually kind of like that one.
All right, I know this one will hit home with you. More
Mm-hmm.
guarantees for better undrafted free agents.
I'm not going to pretend like this is going to put a Lombardi in a trophy case for Pittsburgh, but man, Dave, this one has driven me up a wall for years and years. And I was hoping and praying that whenever Omar Khan took over, this would change, and it really hasn't. Pittsburgh has this very old school model in terms of how they distribute money to undrafted free agents, where they only use a signing bonus pool, not even the whole lot of it, about maybe half of it, where teams circumvent the cap on the signing bonus pool by offering partial base salary guarantees. And so the top free agents will get 200,000 fully guaranteed in their base salary along with a 50K signing bonus, where Pittsburgh will just offer the signing bonus of $25,000. And so it makes them non-competitive for the top, 70 or so undrafted free agents. And for a team that wants to build with the draft and do roster building that way, post draft is a component of it. For a team with a rich history of undrafted free agents, they have to be more competitive here because, yes, there are things like opportunity and scheme fit and coaching and relationships that will impact decisions for undrafted free agents, but money talks in a big way. Even Jalen Warren, who only got 12K signing bonus, said, the reason why he came to Pittsburgh was they offered the most amount of money because other teams just simply overlooked him and didn't offer as much. And so this one drives me crazy. I understand the risk and the downside. And if the guy doesn't work out, you just burn 200K of dead money off the top. You're not going to hit on all these guys. But Pittsburgh has to be more competitive. Post draft, they are getting absolutely crushed. And it could be something that prevents them from bringing in that one extra guy that goes on to become a real gem.
Right. And the biggest thing is at least start spending up to the max on the pool.
Yeah. I don't know why they don't do that. Again, this I know is precedent where they don't want to do it for one guy and then you got to do it for everybody else. And if you give this guy a huge signing bonus, then that becomes the bar going forward. But they got to get off that stuff.
Even if you were to guarantee money outside, of the pool, like, several teams are doing around the league. Most teams do. I mean, you're not talking about an exorbitant amount of cap being used,
No, it's a couple 100,000. And I don't want to push that aside, but yeah, as a percentage of the cap, it's probably less than 1%.
Those are just the first ones that came to my head. What do you think about the use of void years?
Yeah, it's also interesting. That's probably more your territory to answer that than it is going to be about mine and the pros and cons. But they used it in the COVID year, and that was it. I don't know if it's required, especially for a team that's not paying a franchise quarterback right now. But that's also one that you're more open to considering. Sure.
Now look, it still becomes a thing about how much cash are you spending, right? And how much damage you're potentially doing to future years. But the really the plus to that is it lets you pack more within a cap in a given year, say, so to speak. So it's less. if I were to put it on this list, it would be last.
Okay. Yeah, it's
You know.
okay, but it is something Pittsburgh's been pretty staunchly against, and so you do want to examine all of it.
All right. Well, is there any other precedents coming to the top of your head that you think this team needs to think about organizational wise?
I don't know.
What about the whole athletic profile thing? Does that go back to kind of the culture and the type of player that this team looks for? Who's the Bobby? Who's the Redskins linebacker?
Bobby Wagner?
Well, yeah, Bobby Wagner. What do you reckon that guy's 40 is right about right now?
I know Mike Tomlin's always been a huge Bobby Wagner fan, but yeah, is it they've kind of broken the 30 plus defensive player signing him. They kind of soften on that maybe
a little bit. What I'm getting at here is, I think it goes back to that guy preps for games and that guy's ready to go. He might not be the fastest, most athletic guy on the field, but he is one of the most physical still and one of the most knowledgeable,
Yeah, that's kind of my point about, maybe like I said yesterday's show, when you focus on guys that are tough and physical and play the run and play hard and have that, never say die attitude, you may pass up on the more athletic guy from time to time to focus on the guy with those intangibles a little bit more. And so, yeah, I think you look at that. I was going to float the idea Pittsburgh doesn't often take major character risks in the draft, guys that have clear red flag issues. And there's certainly valid reasons for that, but they're really since the Mike Adams, Martavis Bryant issues, they've been pretty squeaky clean in terms of guys without any big red flags. Should that change?
I think they do need to soften. Now, look, I think you got to be careful there. But I mean, look, they circle back to their own Cam Sutton, right? And he wasn't the cleanest of guy when they went back to him.
Right, but the idea is get someone who's talented, and you take the risk on this prospect who has a lot of talent but has some baggage too. They'll do it with some guys that might be a little more diva, like in a George Pickens, for example, but he didn't have true baggage coming out of Georgia. But there are guys. Again, there are good reasons to not do this because obviously there is risk of you watch the Bengals take Jermaine Burton and he had big time character concerns coming out of college and that's followed him through his rookie season. I'm not saying they have to do that, but that's kind of maybe less of a little more informal precedent there in the draft.
All right. Anything else you think they should look at?
Nothing else coming to mind right now. I'd have to sit on it some more.
All right, where to from here now?
Let's talk about the list of free agents. We're going to do that for Sunday's show. Then the show kind of ran a little bit long, so we just pushed it into Monday. So, Dave, you had an early list of initial pending free agents, a couple of the restricted exclusive rights, and then, of course, the standard unrestricted free agents that make up the majority of the players for the 2025 offseason. We kind of go through things one by one and just kind of give our initial thoughts and feelings on the likelihood of if they'll return and should they return.
All right, I have these sorted by their most recent APY. We'll start with the unrestricted type. Mike Williams, his contract set to void in February, and then after that, he will technically become an unrestricted free agent at the start of new league year. Do you try to re-sign him, and if so, around what APY?
Nope, need a whole new infusion of receiver help. So thank you, but goodbye. Mike Williams.
I would not be opposed to bringing him back, but I mean, it would have to be damn near veteran benefit type deal with, very minimum, whatever the minimum signing bonus for this upcoming 163.5. I don't know if that's the carryover for what it is in 2025. Forgot to look at that. The only And this is going to be the same story with a lot of these guys on this list, right? If they want to come back and willing to take the minimum, yeah, you can compete for a roster spot. But in no way, shape, or form am I throwing a ton of money at Mike Williams. He's more than welcome to come back and compete for a roster spot, but definitely not, at any considerable money. James Daniels.
Off the Achilles with McCormick, I was a big Daniels fan. Felt super bad for him getting hurt early season, impacting his market value. But no, gonna move on from James Daniels.
Yeah, I think especially with what they have invested now with their offensive line through the draft. I like James Daniels. He's still young. That injury is going to be tough for him to come back from, though. But he's going to go probably elsewhere. Probably not going to get the money that he thought he was probably going to get going into the season because of that injury. But he should do okay. But I don't expect him back. Dante Jackson.
Just reporting, maybe less reporting, but more predictions and thoughts from Jerry Dulac suggesting that he thinks the team will bring Dante Jackson back, which I'm sure will cause some people to pull over when they're driving right now. I like the job that Jackson did early in the season, midway through the season. There was a lot of regression late in the year. I know injuries played a factor in that. Honestly, one of my biggest concerns with Jackson were the injuries. How many games this year did he either not play or not finish in because of the back, because of the shoulder, because of the whatever? And so from an availability standpoint, probably not on Jackson. I know most would just push him out the door. The one thing, and this is not the number one reason to keep him, but if you do replace him, you're going through another kind of starting corner duo next year. It's been kind of this revolving door veteran types you've been bringing in and pushing out, Levi Wallace to Patrick Peterson to Dante Jackson. So you look at Corey Trice and obviously what he could offer you in year 3. Maybe he's got a good chance to be a starting corner next year opposite of Porter. All of that is to say probably pass on Dante Jackson.
He's another one. If he wants to come back at and he'll probably get a little bit better market from what the Steelers will want to offer, I think, than maybe what he can maybe get on the outside. But I'm not going to lose any sleep if he's not back. But I could see him coming back. Definitely not at this $6 million APY. It would have to be probably at least half of that.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe 4 or so. I can appreciate some of the things that Dante Jackson did this year. Had 5 interceptions for him. Probably a lot of wins this year for getting to come to a place in Pittsburgh and compete. And he played in his first playoff game yesterday or Saturday. I don't know if anyone realizes that. But yeah, probably just with how bad that ending was, and again the injuries just really made him tough to trust. I think you start opening the door for Corey Trice next year.
All right. Justin Fields is the next via APY.
Yeah, of course, quarterbacks are going to require some longer conversations. I kind of get my initial thoughts. I'm still working through yesterday about how do you look at the quarterback situation? How do you look at the vision for next year? What is the theory to try to rebuild this thing and get back to some winning ways? And his thoughts have been pushing more towards Justin Fields. Recently signed him to a 2-year deal. It's not going to cost you a tremendous amount of money, and lean on his legs and progression in his second year, and working with Arthur Smith in year 2, and hope you get some benefit from that. And that might be the way to kind of bridge this thing and still evaluate Fields as future without committing to him in that sense. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. But obviously there's going to be a whole lot of conversations about that going forward.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what his market might be across the NFL. Quarterback such a need position, even backups. Is it fair to say Justin Fields, at least the way the kind of the season ended, would be considered one of, if not the top backups in the NFL?
Yeah, I certainly would put him on the short list of top backups.
And probably a lower tier, obviously, starter, at least initially, until he proves otherwise.
Yeah, it's probably fair overall, but obviously what he can do with his legs is dynamic, and he proved he could play within scheme and take the coaching pretty well and play cleaner football, which was his biggest issue. And I know there was issues in terms of, there's some regression later in the season. That Raiders game, for example, was pretty poor from him and showed some of his warts. And the cap on how much his team can score, et cetera. But there was newness too, for him to come in first year, and Arthur Smith first year, and try to work on that. Tom Harth, quarterbacks coach, first year. And so you'd be hopeful there can be some progression in year number 2.
I think they should do everything in their power. And obviously, it's going to start at the quarterback position is going to be something that they're going to have to, I think, get solved by the middle of March, by the start of the new league year. If they don't go the Russell Wilson path, then they really should consider going to Justin Fields' path, considering, a lot of people I think are going to talk. Would the Vikings trade would the Vikings even consider trading McCarthy?
I don't know what's in their head. Obviously, they have to get Darnold done first for that to even open up, and that's probably the expectation and their hope. I don't think so, just given the tricky nature of quarterbacks and how quickly these worms can turn. And obviously, they still like McCarthy a whole lot. So I doubt they'd be super inclined if they got a really good offer for it. But I think a team like to have two quarterbacks they really like and trust and don't want to just give those guys away.
Right. Now, look, if they did make him available, you would think they would want a pretty hefty price for it because he's cheap, right? And it gives them, even if they could double dip, they could go down the Sam Darnold path and still have McCarthy there to develop as well too. So I would be apt for them to make a run at that if he were made available, but it would be pricey to acquire him. But that's another can of worms.
The better question is, what is the market value for Justin Fields? I think determining numbers for both these quarterbacks for Russ and Fields is tricky.
Yeah, I mean, look what you roll back to what a guy like even Mitch Trubisky got a couple of years ago, right?
I think Fields is way above that. Just
right.
Given the cap has gone up and Fields' potential. Are we talking like Geno Smith, $25 million is kind of the first number I broach.
Man, that seems a little high. I definitely think it's a lot more than what Mitch Trubisky got a couple of years ago.
Yeah, but it's. I mean, he'd be the starting quarterback if you signed him. The cap has gone up. The quarterback position has exploded. We're talking 50, 60 million is going to be pretty much the norm here this, next couple of years. Dak has already touched that number. So 25 million does not feel too high in a world where 50 and 60 is pretty common.
And you're not paying him that to just stand on the sideline.
No, this would be, but again, this isn't such a commitment where if it does go sideways, you found some other option that you couldn't manage that and handle that in some sense. And so I think the one thing Pittsburgh has done well throughout all this kind of messy quarterback stuff post-Ben is they've not paid a guy and kind of been stuck on that contract the way the Falcons are now stuck on the Kirk Cousins contract, the way that thing's kind of quickly, got into a tailspin. And so I'm careful with how those dollars get allocated. But if you did a 2-year, $50 million deal with Justin Fields, I know it sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but in the grand scheme of quarterback pay, it's pretty cheap overall and gives you some flexibility to kind of evaluate Fields, not fully commit to him, explore some other options if opportunities arise while still having a quarterback for 2025.
All right, Nate Herbig.
Is that the number that you think? I mean, if you had to put a number,
it's definitely. I think you make a good point. The top of the market's right around 60, and if you could, it's not unreasonable to think at least a third of that would be Justin Fields worth.
Okay, fair enough.
All right, Nate Herbig.
Yes, funny as Nate Herbig is Zach Frazier in. Thank you, Nate, and good luck elsewhere.
If he wants to come back on a minimum to compete for the backup swing spot, I'm fine with that. But anything much more than that, no.
Okay.
Who is next on the list here for the Steelers? Landon Roberts.
Yeah, it's one guy I want to bring back. You talk about those are the types of people that you want in this building, especially for this defense, where I think you really need to examine. This defense really felt flat at the end of the season, and you wonder why that is. And you wonder about the culture and the attitude of this team, the demeanor of this team. That's a guy that embodies everything that you're looking for, and so that's a guy you certainly want to bring back.
He had is his APY of $3.5 million okay? Is he worth more than that?
If you get him on the same terms, what was the contract he signed initially? 2 years, $10 million.
Yeah, something
when he first came in. If you could basically copy and paste whatever he signed for before, just to adjust for his age, but also adjust for the cap going up. Basically, to rewrite that deal is fine with me.
All right. Next, I'm fine with bringing him back as well too. How about Najee Harris is next one on the list. What's going to happen there, and what should happen there?
Yeah, do like also in that Dante Jackson comment, believing that Harris would walk. This one to me is pretty much a no-brainer. You're going to let him walk, and I think that was to me pretty much written in stone once they declined the 5th-year option on Najee Harris. So I think he'll be looking. I think you had a good question: which team will be playing for, and why will it be the Raiders next year? Is probably a fair assessment.
Yeah, I think he is gone. Who did I say was next on the
Casey.
list? DeMonte Casey.
Yeah, still played a role this year as a dimebacker, 6 DB, some big nickel, which they ran a lot against Baltimore, but he's into his 30s and yeah, going to move on, get younger there.
Yeah, I think he's gone as well. That brings us to Van Jefferson.
I could appreciate guys like Van Jefferson for their dirty work, the blocking, but we got to evolve here. We got to get I want a whole infusion of talent at receiver. I mean, just soup to nuts, tear it down to the studs, essentially. I mean, you'll have obviously Pickens, and we'll talk about his future in Austin and Roman Wilson in year two, but really need a pretty big upheaval at receiver. So goodbye, Van Jefferson.
I agree with you there. Goodbye, Van Jefferson. Let's go to the next one on the list, which is Kyle Allen.
Yeah, I'll bring back a Kyle Allen. I know Pittsburgh likes to have experience on the depth chart, top to bottom, and he'd be cheap to re-sign and to keep in a number 3 type role. So yeah, I'll keep him.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get him for veteran benefit contract, why not?
Yeah.
Let's go next to Michael Pruitt.
No, I mean, Pruitt had some value as an inline blocker, but older, knee issues popping up a lot. And I think you can find some cheaper, younger inline blocking help from him that can hopefully offer a bit more on special teams.
I agree there. Let's go to Tyler Matakevich.
I could go either way on it. I mean, he is who he is. Dirty Red as a special teamer, no real defensive value. May look to get younger there, but it can go either way.
I mean, they can bring him back and let him compete for a roster spot at a veteran benefit contract, but obviously nothing more than that, right?
Exactly.
Let's see. Next on the list would be Russell Wilson.
Yeah, it's crazy because we were both pretty confident for a large chunk of the season once he started starting that he would come back, and now it's you wonder if it's going to go the other way. He did express a desire to return post game right after the Ravens loss. He says he hopes he's here next year. I know him and Tomlin have a really good relationship. I really want to see how this one plays out. Like I said, I'm now kind of trending more in that Fields direction as a shorter term. Would be cheaper to do overall, younger, all that kind of stuff. That's kind of what's pushing me there, and just a regression from Russ. So obviously, as you said, it's going to be the number one storyline coming off the offseason and to start things off. I really want to see how Pittsburgh approaches it, but now I'm personally going more in the Fields direction.
It's now that the season's over with, it's hard to imagine both Russell Wilson and Justin Fields being back, right?
I mean, to me, it was always going to be tough to see both guys return, but yes, including now, it's still tough to see that occurring.
Yeah, unless they could get Russell Wilson for about the same, it's just we've seen his top side now. And as we said in the show the other day, I think he played a little bit better than what I envisioned him playing. But at his age, can you duplicate that? Are you going to be back in the same place? Does Justin Fields still can you build your offense more around the mobility of Justin Fields and still get kind of the same results and maybe make your run game a little bit better? And I mean, hit the age, and yeah, it's probably time to go a different direction.
If you had to make a case to keep Russ, what would your reasons be? Would you say, well, give him some more weapons to throw to on the outside, and there's a leadership component, and when this offense was rolling, there's a reason why it looked like Russ was, the great elixir and great answer to the Steelers' problems. They were a 10-3 team. I don't want to forget about that entirely.
I think the best things that Russell Wilson brought this team was the under center pre-play aspect of kind of knowing what he's looking at and just the operations standpoint of it under center, the experience that he brings. For all the crap that he got, I thought he was a good leader. I never thought he really said a bad thing. Several times I think he went kind of over the top with trying to make sure to name everybody on offense when being careful not to forget anybody and all like that. But I think as a locker room guy, as a leader of an offense, he's fine. And then obviously the deep ball. I mean, that wasn't a surprise. That was one of the draws to his game, was his ability to push the football down the field, and really specifically outside the hash marks as well too. But we did see the limitations that he also has, the middle of the field stuff. As that staffer in the Hard Knocks said, it's either layups or 3-pointers for him. All that said, I still think he played a little better than what I envisioned him playing. But with that being the top side, can you duplicate? What would make him better, obviously, is more weapons, and a better running game. And if you can't guarantee me you can have all that, then I would expect regression from him for sure. And I think he would need those weapons to maintain at least the quality of play that he gave the team this year.
I guess if you're the Steelers, you sit there and say, well, we hope to have more weapons. Our plan would be to have more weapons. Like, how could their plan not to be to do both those things, improve the run game and have more weapons?
Yeah, but look what they did this year and roll Van Jefferson out there for 800 snaps or whatever it was. Michael Pruitt. But I mean, it's hard to imagine them having both Russell Wilson and Justin Fields back. All right, next one should be easy. Cameron Sutton.
Yeah, goodbye, Cam Sutton.
Yeah, goodbye. Goodbye, Cameron Sutton. James Pierre.
I'm a little less open to the litany of 1 year, veteran benefit or whatever contracts than maybe you are. I do want some true roster turnover here, but that's a guy, if he wants to sign a 1 year deal for the minimum and come back and compete to be a gunner as a reserve corner, no longer the next man up a corner on the outside, then I'm okay with that.
Yeah, he'd have to be a fourth or fifth guy, and it'd have to be Danny Smith saying, I got to have that guy back in this building for a minimum salary benefit, just more than anything to kind of protect myself from a gunner situation.
Yeah, I agree.
Max Sharping. People are going, who?
Goodbye, Max Sharping, backup offensive lineman.
Yeah, I mean, you can, if you wanted to sign him to an offseason, minimum just to let him compete, fine. If not, out the door he goes. CJ Henderson. We hardly knew you, CJ Henderson.
Yeah, he was on the practice squad, former first-round pick, pedigree guy, had a neck issue, got put on injured reserve, never came back. It's impossible to really judge. It depends on how he practiced. If you want to bring him back, I guess, for some depth and take a flyer, then it's probably won't, I don't know, reserve futures contract point with him. I'm not entirely sure his status, but that's if you want to do that, that's fine. If not, that's fine too.
And not a big deal spending a lot of time on, right? Right. Same with Calvin Anderson, who played, I guess, okay in this game against the Ravens after Dan Moore left, but still a guy that bottom of the barrel tackle situation.
Yeah, I know you could bring him back, but I just want to get a whole new offensive line, kind of look, some backups in there, some different people, some different feels. And, I know with Dan Moore leaving, maybe they would bring Anderson back to just have a veteran experience left tackle, not to start, but just to have. But again, that can go either way.
All right. This one will maybe have a little discussion. Ben Skoranek.
Yeah, I'm okay with bringing Skoranek back. Back end of the depth chart. If you want that as your kind of blocking receiver, I can live with that more than a Van Jefferson that's a number 2 and playing significant snaps. And as a gunner, Skoranek did well. I liked his demeanor. So, yeah, I like to bring back Ben Skoranek.
I mean, if you wanted to bring that guy back, if you were going to carry 5 wide receivers on a team, along those lines and do something along that nature and have him play on special teams and him be kind of an emergency option at wide receiver. But once again, I mean, it all depends on price. I mean, he's a good special teamer. He's a modern day Miles Boykin, right?
I think even above that, I think he's offering a bit more offensively, maybe even a better blocker. So, yeah, similar, but I would say even better.
Dan Moore Jr.
No, he's not going to come back. I mean, I think he's progressed. I like Dan Moore. He's a really humble guy, really hard worker. I appreciate his journey, but I think I know we've counted him out quite a bit in the past, and maybe doing so is dangerous again. And I'm not assuming that Broderick Jones will be the perfect answer at left tackle, but with him, with Fautani coming back, who they're probably still very high on, and just giving more price tag, even if it's not maybe quite what it looked like it was going to be mid-season, even if he's going to cost 8-10 million per year. I'm not going to pay that.
Yeah, he's going to go. He's going to end up in a different uniform during the offseason. I think that's pretty apparent there. Getting down to the bottom of the barrel here, Isaiah Loudermilk.
Not that it's going to be super consequential. I think he's been able to raise his floor as a rotational base defensive end. Probably, like I said, with the trenches, I really want to maybe focus on swapping some guys out and getting some real dudes up front. I know with Ogunjobi, what's going to happen with him. You may re-sign Loudermilk to kind of protect yourself a little bit. So if you cut Dean Lowry, then okay, bring back Loudermilk. If you keep Dean Lowry, then you probably can do without Loudermilk.
All right. The next one's a restricted one. This was fairly easy. Jalen Warren, second round tender, and try to work out a long-term deal with him.
Yeah, that seems to be the most sensible thing with him. Would there be any chance of a team trying to put in an offer sheet, even at a second round tender for Jalen Warren?
I don't think so. Not on a second round. That's why you have to do a second round so other teams leave him alone. Because if you just do original round tender on him, teams are going to come after him.
Yeah, I get that, and I think with a good running back class, it probably would lessen those odds. Even we're pretty low on Warren. So yeah, tender, Jalen Warren. I agree. What will be his market value on a long term deal? You floated that.
It would have to be higher than the tender, right? And the tender is going to be right around what, 5-something million or so. So, I think for him to sign a long-term deal, you're probably looking at, I don't know, 7-8 million at least.
So like 3 years, 21 million.
Yeah, probably on the low side, to be honest with you.
Okay. Yeah, not saying that's bad. I'm just trying to get some numbers on it.
All right, a couple exclusive rights free agents who can easily be retained by just merely offering them a 1-year contract for the minimum for their credited years, Jeremiah Moon and Ryan McCollum.
I'd do that to both. Yeah, I'd bring both back.
All right. I agree. Nothing at risk if you were to do that. All right, that's it. That's the list.
So yeah, like I said, it's a long list. It's a more notable list than last year's, which was pretty uninspiring. This one probably less inspiring than we thought it was 5-6 weeks ago. But yeah, it'll be interesting.
All right. Do you want to talk about possible cuts, or do you want to start getting into emails or whatnot?
Let's just mention some of the cuts here briefly, and you maybe have a list here that I don't have offhand. My first thought goes to Larry Ogunjobi. I guess that's an option. He's got a roster bonus due in March, I believe, right? You can probably walk me through some of the numbers, but that's a guy. I think he's got to get replaced.
I do. I got a little bit of pushback on that. Some people saying, they think that probably give him one more year here. He's due $4 million base salary and a $3 million roster bonus in March. So you're going to know pretty quick. Probably have to make a decision with him. You would save obviously $7 million against the cap plot prior to roster displacement. Personally, I think it's time to cut bait with him. I think his best football is behind him now. For sure.
Yeah, I think at best, he did flash, and there were some highs in his game. I thought he got off to a nice start this year. He was healthy in the summer, and that was important. But a lot of fading down the stretch. The Ravens game yesterday was bad or Saturday was bad for a lot of guys. But I thought it was pretty bad for Ogunjobi. Just not sturdy enough against the run, not impactful against as a pass rusher. His pressures are on average, and his sack production was meager across the board. He's in his 30s. He's had some injury issues over the years. Some lower body stuff's probably going to really keep catching up to him. So just not worth it.
This next one's real easy because of his price tag. Preston Smith. If he wants to take a cut damn near down to minimum, which he's probably unlikely to do, he's got to go out the door because he's got a $12 million base salary due. He's got per game roster bonuses and that total out, I think, 900,000. And he's also got an offseason workout bonus of 500,000. So I don't even want him working out in the weight room at that price. So he's going to have to take a very significant haircut, or he'll be out the door, right?
Yeah, it's William Jackson part two. Smith more productive than Jackson obviously was, but from a contract albatross standpoint, even if he wanted to take a big reduction, I probably would still move on.
Got a little bit of pushback on this as well too, probably more sentimental than anything. Cole Holcomb, who's due let's see, $4 million base salary and a $2 million roster bonus. I'm not seeing a note of when that roster bonus is due, so it could be related to him making the 53 or not. I don't. They certainly wouldn't have made that a per game roster bonus, I don't think, with him there. But the fact of the matter is, if he stays, it's going to be a $6 million cap charge with him. They obviously had him decrease his to put him on PUP for him to even stay on the roster on PUP all season. They made him put in that clause where he had the split salary aspect, and that's what he rode the 2024 season on. I feel bad for the guy. I hope he makes a complete comeback. I hope hasn't played his last down in the NFL, but I don't think you can bring him back at $6 million.
Yeah, I'm with you. Now, I think you have to make sure, well, you get Roberts done and get him back. And if you do, I think that really cements Holcomb. So I think you try to get Roberts done before any decision time would have to come on Holcomb, just to make sure that you have your top three. If you didn't bring Roberts back for whatever reason, does that door open maybe a little bit more for Holcomb potentially? I'm super excited that he was able to come back and practice and work in full and seemingly be, fully recovered from that devastating knee injury suffered in November 2023. But no, just giving on Peyton Wilson going in a year two and Patrick Queen being the 3-down guy. And then the desire to bring back Roberts, you just have all your, ducks kind of in a row there, and Holcomb can't be a number 4 linebacker at that kind of salary.
I agree. I think he should be out the door if he's not going to take a significant pay cut. Two kind of minor ones to talk about here: Dean Lowry and Montravius Adams.
I mean, Lowry's struggling to even dress. And so, like I said, depending on how Loudermilk's contract goes, I think you could have just one of those guys next year. Adams, backup nose tackle. I don't know. I mean, do you look more for a plugging, nose tackle? There's probably discussion to be had about that. What is Adams' contract? He signed a 2-year deal.
Yeah, it's 2.25 against the cap this year.
Yeah, I mean,
and then after roster displacement, subtract 900,000 or so from that. You're talking about saving 1 point something. I mean, could you carry him at least through the off season and see how it shakes out from an injury standpoint, and then decide?
Yeah, it's probably the best way to go about it.
And you could probably do the same with Dean Lowry, if we're being honest here, because of the money he's making. Chances of both those guys. The chances of both those guys being on the 53 are probably slim. You don't want to get in that situation, right?
Yeah, I want to see some change here, and you would if you're releasing Ogunjobi, and if you're doing that, then you probably want to have some veterans on the roster to kind of protect yourself and have something as you kind of look at some replacement options. But I just think this defensive line needs an infusion of talent, some youth, some run defense, some physicality, and so I don't want to be blind to that and just start running these groups back again. Trenches, I think you really have to start kind of tweaking some O-line a little bit less because you got young guys that can grow and develop and ascend into roles, but D-line I think needs to have some changes up front.
All right, for everybody that we just rattled off, except for Montravius Adams, that list would be Preston Smith, Larry Ogunjobi, Cole Holcomb, and Dean Lowry. If you cut all 4 of those guys, you're going to clear right around $30 million in cap space after roster displacement and all. So if you're listening to this, those are probably the 4 guys you want to focus on when it comes to potential cuts by the start of the new league year.
Yeah, that's good to know. And if you had to, I mean, is Ogunjobi, what are the odds they cut Ogunjobi? Not in terms of what you think, but in terms of what is
I
likely.
I think it's very likely that he's going to be out the door.
Okay. I'm not entirely sure. I think it's above 50% he is cut. I'm just not entirely sure whether in on him. But as his snap count did reduce, you saw Benton really take over sub package reps, which I think was a little bit of a sign of where this thing is headed.
Yeah, I'll unless he takes a haircut, which I'm not expecting him to do with the pay. I think he's out the door
Right.
by the start of the new league year. Okay, anything else you want to address in this show?
No, let's get to the emails we've been promising. I know there's a lot probably in there. Reminder, we'll do a live stream tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern time, where I'm sure the Seas will continue to be angry and restless and all those kinds of things. But I know we've been meaning to get to some emails, so let's do that to close out today's show.
All right, let me get to some guys that we don't hear from here. We got a lot of regulars in here, and we appreciate the regulars and all, but got so many emails in here. I want to get to some guys that maybe we don't hear from. Here, Kane 22. Why would Rooney extend Mike Tomlin last year? At the very least, he should have waited to see what this year looked like. Now we're stuck with him and doomed to be a one and done team. Do you think he really cares about winning or just filling the stands and making money?
Well, I don't know what's in Rooney's head. I wouldn't accuse him. I'm not saying you are, but I wouldn't go as far to say that. I do think he cares about winning. I know people will disagree with how raw this loss is. The reason for the extension was to avoid that lame duck status, which is what most owners and teams try to avoid, where it becomes harder to recruit for agents, for example, with a lame duck head coach. And you're seeing some of the things happening in Dallas. Probably one reason why their free agency this past year was super inactive. It was hard to get guys in when you had McCarthy in the last year of his deal. So that's pretty standard practice for the NFL and for Pittsburgh, certainly to extend out a little bit early. But point taken, because you do feel pretty much locked into Tomlin for the foreseeable future.
All right. Davis Liddell writes in, thank you for the coverage. And this season would have been so much more successful with a solid running game. And it starts with the O-line. A couple of questions here. What would a new O-line coach provide to this team? And who are some names that you're looking to hire? Number two, the Steelers obviously invested a lot in the O-line in the past couple of years. Has there been more of an issue with evaluating and scouting these players, or is the issue more to do with developing them? So you can kind of package those two together, really, Alex.
The first part of that question was about what are we looking for in an O-line coach?
Yeah, what would a new O-line coach provide to this team, and who are some of the names you're looking to hire? I mean, fresh set of eyes, a fresh set of operational execution, technique, those kind of things. As far as the list goes, I mean, I don't even think we're there yet to building out a list yet.
No, I'm not there right now. I did remember seeing the other day, and I'm not saying this is a candidate, he's not, but I remember when they were looking at O-line coaches before hiring Pat Meyer, they looked at Hank Fraley, who I think has gone on to pretty good success, and he's even getting some, I think, offensive coordinator looks right now. So you talk about the value of a O-line coach hire. It is, I think, such an important component to your coaching staff. And Fraley is in Detroit. Yeah, he's in Detroit, and you see the success that Detroit has had. So missed opportunities there. But all that spilt milk aside, yeah, basically what Dave said. And Meyer's philosophy is it's fairly different than others, especially in pass pro. But yeah, just a different way going about things and teaching, and hopefully, especially for the zone scheme, to get on the same page and get guys getting to the second level, getting hats on linebackers. There are just a lot of issues in that. So just being a more buttoned up technical group.
And yes, they have had I don't think so much maybe, because look, Zach Frazier had a great year, right? I think Mason McCormick did some good things. Like to see Mason McCormick become a better run blocker. Broderick Jones has been a mess, right?
Yeah, he has. I mean, and there's a lot of questions. If you're assuming that Dan Moore leaves, what is the confidence in just making Broderick Jones your left tackle next year?
He's got to get better. I'll tell you that. I'm not convinced just switching sides will do that.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm with you. So, I mean, that's probably the way they go about it, but it's not like, okay, just put in Broderick Jones, clap your hands, and you're good to go. There's a lot of anxiety I'll have there.
How much say should Arthur Smith, assuming Arthur Smith stays, how much say should Arthur Smith have in the say of the new offensive line coach?
Yeah, there's got to be influence there. Those guys got to be aligned, and I think that's one reason I brought up a couple weeks ago about the first kind of thoughts about maybe making a change at O-line coach was to get better alignment. I don't know if they're not aligned, but something's not working right here in run game, and these things just are not being coordinated well. There's been a lot of disjointedness in terms of these zone schemes, especially. So yeah, I think you have to have Smith. I know it won't be popular because Smith is not a popular man in Pittsburgh right now. But if you're gonna hire a guy, de facto run game coordinator, O-line coordinator for a run heavy, former offensive lineman himself and Arthur Smith, those guys have to be on the same page.
All right, Christopher King writes in, what a game, 24 hours later and still nothing to really feel decent about. My question is, what do you think the Steelers should do at defensive line? Benton and Adams seem to consistently get driven off the ball. Larry O is likely gone, and Hayward is another year older. Is there anyone worth keeping, re-signing out of Lowry, Loudermilk, or Leal? He adds Logan Lee will get a shot in training camp. Would you strongly consider trying to bring Javon Hargrave back if he's interested? First, let me start. I'll take part of this. Adams is just a backup guy. All right, we just talked a little bit about him. If he comes back, he'll be able to compete for a roster spot, and kind of that's that. Benton has got to. We got to see a jump from Benton in both as a pass rusher and as a run defender in his third season, but there is talent to work with there. You see some highs and some lows. We got to see less of a, I guess what I'm getting at here is less of a swing, less of a variance, I think, with Benton. But I'm still bullish in Benton overall. Larry O, I agree, is likely gone. Hayward will be another year. Cam Hayward had an absolutely phenomenal year. You do wonder, can he do? I wouldn't put it past him. I wouldn't put it out on Twitter either, because he'll bulletin board that stuff. But I mean, that guy played. That was an incredible season for him. Lowry is just a backup. Loudermilk is just a backup. Leal to this point is just a backup. I would hate to get myself in a position where all three of those guys were on my 53-man roster along with Adams next year. I mean, that's just not going to happen. Logan Lee, he got to get some sand in his pants. It's, like it or not, it's an uphill battle for Logan Lee right now.
Yeah, you laid it out well. I just want to see an infusion of talent, physicality, run defense. So yeah, I think the question's point, well taken. I think the answer there, Dave, you provided is solid. I mean, do you consider? I know we're looking down the road here, but do you consider a first round defensive lineman?
Absolutely.
A lot of other issues here.
Yes. I think I think that's an under the radar thing. People are talking about corner. People are talking about what are they talking about?
Receiver.
Wide receiver, corner. A lot of people, and with good reason,
Mm-hmm.
people are talking about that. But if you got a guy that can come in, if you got a guy that you think could be your next Cam Hayward, and that's a tall task, right? But it, and I haven't even sniffed, going down the list and all like that. But I do think you've got to look at that. And I think on top of it, you got to look at a couple of free agents out there as well, too. I think you have got to see what you've got to do up front on this defensive line to prevent having had happen what happened against the Ravens.
Yeah, I agree. You need some butt kickers up front, and trenches again philosophically is where I think things have to start. By the way, I should note that Pittsburgh officially picking 21st overall in the 2025 NFL draft. So you can put that one in. Of course, trades could always impact things, but that's the pick they're going to have going into the draft. Yeah, Mason Graham, Michigan, which he's probably too blue chip for Pittsburgh to actually get him. But yeah, if you can get that kind of caliber guy early, I'm all for it.
And yeah, would you consider Javon Hargrave at the right price, considering things go the way we think they're going to go with the 49ers and him get cut, and also assuming, which is dangerous, that he's fully recovered from his injury? He should be, though, because that I think that happened in September with, what was it, tricep, bicep, something like that. There now, he is obviously longer in the tooth, but you know him. Is he a guy that you would consider for the right price?
No, I wouldn't. I mean,
I
I love
would.
Jay Wobble. No, you got to get younger. You can't keep just running back these same guys. You got to get some new people in. I mean, he was obviously successful in Pittsburgh the first stint, but he was not that plugger against the run. He's pretty similar to Benton. I don't know exactly what benefits you're gaining that you don't already have, and you're just getting older too.
I now look, I wouldn't do that in lieu of addressing the draft, okay, or early in the draft. But if I'm parting ways with Ogunjobi, and if I'm convinced Lowry, Loudermilk, Leal not going to be on the roster, I would consider for the right price Javon Hargrave
But is he going to
personally.
play base end for you? He's a squatty nose
No,
tackle.
I would slot him in behind a guy like I would try to upgrade, I guess, Montravius in the situation with him.
I mean, I guess if he's going to be a backup number 2 nose tackle that's playing scant snaps, then okay. But
I mean, I'm obviously looking to save money here. It would obviously be less than what Ogunjobi. And look, I don't think this is the linchpin, obviously, to the offseason, but he asked, would I consider bringing him back? Yeah, if the price is right and he's recovered, I would.
all right, I generally would not.
All right. Let's see here. Taylor Carpenter says, put down the pitchforks, guys. Let me start saying I never miss a podcast. Steelers Depot, my only trusted, respected source. You guys do an unbelievable job. That being said, your recent post Ravens game podcast is the only one I've ever just stopped and not finished. It wasn't a we were both tired and cranky, and it probably won't go down as a top 10 show, I don't think. The criticism of culture, players, Tomlin draft was understandable considering the way we played down the stretch, but I feel it was a little overboard. I guess my main criticism was Alex's comments on culture and not drafting the right type of players. He disagrees completely. You want to know why the Steelers are bounced in the first round again? Take a look at the playoff teams. Starting quarterbacks not named Bo Nix. Without a franchise quarterback, you're not able to consistently contend in the NFL, period. I agree that there are areas that need addressed with the organization, such as the way we sign undrafted free agents, like Dave briefly touched on. But I think the fact that this team even made the playoffs with the talent on the roster was a minor miracle. This team's quarterback situation has been a stinker since Ben's final 2 years. We still produced a winning team. That's culture and that's coaching, he says. Yeah, it sucks to be in this loop or barely making the playoffs and getting bounced, but without a blue chip quarterback, that's just our reality right now. Yeah, we didn't draft great the last few years of Colbert, but I think Omar has drafted well the last couple of years, and we are building as well as we can right now. I'm fine with sending the O-line and defensive coordinator up the road, but making huge organizational philosophical changes, I feel, is just foolish. A lot to chew on there.
Yeah, I can appreciate. I mean, I get the thoughts and I appreciate the feedback there and the honest candor. I mean, I get that. Yes, we don't have a franchise quarterback. It is hard to win. You know, I always say you're in two camps. Either you're a team with a franchise quarterback or you're a team looking for one. And Pittsburgh clearly in the latter camp right now. But I just sit there and say, how do you lose 5 games in a row? And how do you be uncompetitive in 4 of those? And you not be able to rally and beat the Bengals? How do you give up 300 yards on the ground to Baltimore in the playoffs? How do those plays where Pittsburgh just looks disinterested and is barely getting off the line? Those are the alarm bells to go off for me. How do you have 7 straight seasons with a 3-game losing streak, including this year, which became a new low to go 5 straight games? So I just think with those repeated results, yes, a lack of a quarterback is an element of it, but it can't be the sole element. And I just think you have to look at what's going on internally. When you hear Najee Harris talk about that, maybe the team was listening to the media too much, and you had the offensive culture issues last year. And I see some of the tape this year where Pittsburgh just is not playing with the same pride that they should be playing to, that the Steelers are expected to be playing to, and those are concerning to me. But agree to disagree. And again, I understand totally the point about the quarterback situation because yes, until that gets fixed, then you're not going to truly contend consistently.
Look, the type of show the perfect type of show that was needed on Sunday was never going to come about, really, because you're going to have people on both sides of the fence on this thing, even though most of them are on the blow it up, fire Mike Tomlin train. There's going to be something that Alex and I are going to have to look at and get feel from the listenership of how long do we stay on the bash Mike Tomlin train, I guess you could say. I tried to say, in that Sunday show too, at some point we're just going to have to accept, assuming that Mike Tomlin stays, that every show can't be about throughout the offseason they should have fired Mike Tomlin.
Yeah, and I'm reading some news here. Mike McCarthy officially out in Dallas, so that situation's been brewing. But McCarthy will not return as the Cowboys head coach in 2025.
All right, that's quite interesting. He'll probably land somewhere, you would think, right?
Yeah, there's been a lot of interest. Chicago, it sounds like the Saints might have some interest as well. So I imagine he'll be landing on his feet here pretty quickly. But that situation is finally resolved. It seems like, at least in Dallas.
I think he's probably glad to be out of there, really, to be honest with you.
Yeah, tough year this past year.
Cole Chelbus writes in, my name is Cole, longtime Tomlin hater, first-time emailer and long-time listener. I'm sure you guys will be getting a lot of negativity with this demoralizing loss, so I figured I'd change it up a bit. What are your guys' thoughts on the playoff format potentially getting changed to top 4 teams with the conference getting home games? I'm okay with it, but what does it mean for divisional games? Just curious on your thoughts. Thanks. Bonus, why did Tomlin receive the opening kickoff? Haven't scored an opening. That's a good question. Haven't scored an opening drive TD all season. And he chose to take the football. He says, okay, now I'm done. The play. What are you guys' thoughts getting changed to top 4 teams with the conference getting home games? I'm not sure. Is he just saying make the playoffs just top 4 teams on each side?
I think he's saying you rank it by just overall record. It's not a divisional to avoid, the 14 win Minnesota Vikings being a wild card team.
I got you. That makes sense.
Yeah. Reportedly, the league is going to look at it. I didn't listen to too many of the reports about it, but I know Jonathan Jones was saying the league would examine it. You guys know me, I'm a purist. I mean, I'd rather just lop off that 7 seed, go back to 6. I think that was the perfect format before. I don't have a particular appetite to change the format of it. I don't know if the league would and will or not, but I'm okay with the actual structure in terms of division winners get top 4 seeds, etc. But I'm not sure what the league's going to determine.
But there should be something for winning your damn division, though, even though sometimes it could be, and is 9-8, I guess.
Yeah, or sometimes even worse. But yeah, there's got to be, I think, a reward for winning a division. I agree.
All right. What do you think about Mike Tomlin deciding to receive the opening kickoff?
Yeah, that's a fair point. It is kind of funny. I'm sure there was some sort of confidence. We're going to do it, guys. We got the game plan. We're going to go down and score, and we're going to punt. At least they got a first down this time. But yeah, it is kind of funny to think about. So that's a fair assessment.
All right, Grant Kinney, another kind of new name in here. Thank you for the great coverage this season. I think in general, the Steelers had the wrong vision plan for their offense. Very basic run pass schemes, not running plays to get guys open, not using middle of the field. Explosive pass plays are down the sideline. If a play has success running it multiple times in a row. I don't think you can necessarily point to just Arthur Smith or Russell Wilson, as these are similar trends I feel like I've seen in the previous coordinators and quarterbacks. I didn't feel much different with Pickett. I didn't feel much different with Canada. This tells me it's deeper than that. Is Tomlin limiting the offense by having too much trust in the defense? I think it's an idea worth looking into, he says. In today's NFL, you can't just have a basic old-fashioned offense having the most rushing attempts while also having basic run pass schemes. Wanted to get your thoughts. I'm afraid we will continue to see this trend regardless of who the quarterback OC is. Side note, I'm curious if there's a way to see how the Steelers rank on offense in these categories this year. He's got a lot of different ones here that maybe we'll have a post about and all like that. But what do you think about the core of his email here about really kind of the I guess the Tomlin maybe offensive philosophy of having too much trust in his defense and basically being okay with being I'm paraphrasing it, probably kind of vanilla offensively, and Tomlin's mantra of not being overly risky, probably not preferring at its core to have the ball go to the middle of the field a lot passing game, regardless of the coverage. How would you answer all this?
Yeah, I think it's fairness overall. I think certainly Tomlin, a defensive guy, trusts his defense and has been skittish of his offense, especially post Ben. There was so much trust in Ben, and you're trying to develop that with new quarterbacks, and that I think is proven challenging, which isn't surprising, but it certainly I think is a factor, and that was really evident under Kenny Pickett. They really handled him with kid gloves and really trusted this defense to do just about darn near everything, and that's probably maybe been lessened a little bit this year when you go sign a veteran like Russ. But there was still a lot of trust in this defense, which unfortunately could not answer the call as routinely as they have in the past. So, I mean, in some sense, I can understand Tomlin's belief, but to the question, yeah, I do think that Tomlin has an unwavering belief in his defense and uh, the conservative nature on offense that shows up quite often is a byproduct of that.
If hooked up to a lie detector test and asked if he really hates footballs thrown to the middle of the field more than 10 yards down the field, what do you think Mike Tomlin would say?
I don't know if it's that specific. I just think there's an overall belief of if we take care of the football and play great defense, we're going to be in most of these games, and we believe we can win the vast majority of them with our great kicker and Pittsburgh's record in one score games, which is still the NFL's best under Mike Tomlin of his tenure. So I think that just lends itself to let's play smart, let's not beat ourselves, and frankly, it's proven true. When Pittsburgh takes care of the football, they do win the majority of the games. They didn't win it on Saturday, obviously, but it has kind of been borne out. So I don't think it's about that particular about middle of the field and depth of target, but a conservative nature that protects the football first is, I believe, Tomlin's current theory of how Pittsburgh can win.
Nathan Casey's got one about tossing, electing to receive. Let's take one from Matt Pella here. I have never been one to bang the drum for Mike Tomlin to be fired, but I think it's finally time for a change. What is the point in having the league's highest paid defense when they can't stop anyone when it matters? It's time for a complete overhaul and how the organization thinks it can win in the modern NFL. This is not the 70s anymore, he writes. We need a fresh outlook and need to start investing our resources in building a dynamic offense that can keep up with the rest of the league. I cannot take another year of barely above 500 ball and one and done in the playoffs. It's time to blow it all up.
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of that reaction. Here's my thought, because Pittsburgh has invested in the offense. I do think there's a misnomer. The money may not be there yet because they've done a lot of drafting in these young guys that have yet to be paid. But Pittsburgh has gone, the last 2 years really hot and heavy with this offensive line. And how much better has this offensive line gotten, Dave?
The offensive line,
Mm-hmm.
not very much better.
Right, right. I mean, there's been some individual bright spots. They've gotten better at center, but that's something that's going to have to change here, and they're really banking on and need this offensive line to come together in short order because they've invested so much in the offensive line. First round picks back to back years, second round pick and fourth round pick this year, and it's not like they've missed on all those guys, but just collectively, we're talking about firing the O-line coach, starting over there. This offensive line, you can't spend all this capital and not see some pretty quickly here as a next year clear examples in upgrade from your offensive line as a collective five. If they can't get to a place where it is markedly better and one of the better units in football, it is a big time failure.
How much residual impact is it having now, missing on guys like Green at center and Kevin Dotson? Because you spent draft picks on, even though they were middle round draft picks, you spent draft picks on them, and they flushed out almost as quickly as they got here, and then you have to go back and spend more draft capital on that stuff, and you're not able to use the draft picks on other positions. I mean, it's created that, and along with the Kenny Pickett thing and all like that. I mean, it has had residual impact, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point about then you have to go draft it again. And so you're spending double the capital, sometimes more, going from a third rounder in Green to using that second round pick on Frazier, which was the right pick, but you're having to still reinvest that again. So point taken. So yeah, I think it's that. I think it's the lack of hitting the home runs on the first round guys, and a lot of misses in there recently, and they're really feeling the impact of a team that. Remember that stretch of Colbert in his early days where he was hitting on first round picks every single year? I mean, at least like solid picks to generational players. And it's probably unreasonable to expect that streak to happen again in this modern age, but did not even come close to that. So I think it's a combination of all of what you're saying with misses for the O-line coaches. And when you're a team that wants to run the ball, develop the trenches, a team without a franchise quarterback, and you're missing across the board on the offensive line, you really feel that impact as an offense.
All right, CO Brave Nom 3 DDD writes in, it seemed for the majority of the game, George Pickens had a giant cushion from the defense, and especially in the first half, Arthur Smith would still infuriatingly choose to run on second and long. Why not throw a short curl to Pickens over and over until they respect the short throw? The coverage was so far off, they probably could have gotten 5 yards before he was even touched by a Raven.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for the old 22 fully to come out here. You know who you hired, though. You hired Arthur Smith, one of the most run-heavy offensive coordinators in football. So I'll need to see some of that go back to the tape. But you know the type of guy that you hired. You shouldn't be surprised by how run-heavy Pittsburgh was.
Let's see.
And I say that to the organization, not to the reader, but just that's who they were signing up for.
Let's see if we can take one more here from Zachary Watt, helping the fan base understand Tomlin. Hey, David Knox, with the calls for Tomlin's job, what is sure to be an all-time high? Are there any interesting team metrics that are consistent over Tomlin's career that we can glean any insight from? Aside from the team's record with Tomlin as a coach, are there any other ways we can quantify and measure the quality of his tenure? If so, would you guys be open to publishing an article on using metrics or consistent patterns and trends that we can use to really judge Mike Tomlin as a coach?
That sounds like a summer project, if anything, way down the road. I'm not always as analytically inclined to do some of those heavy, intense number things, mostly because I call them number things, which I'm sure there's a better phrase for. So I don't know. I'm sure there are things out there, but I think just in Pittsburgh, what you should be defined is Lombardies and AFC North, division victories and Super Bowl appearances and all those kinds of things. I think that's how Pittsburgh should be and is supposed to be defined.
All right. Anything else you want to get to here? Any other breaking news or anything?
No. I guess we'll need to keep a watch on also any other smaller coaching changes. Will they lose anybody to the college ranks, Dave? That happens occasionally each year. Any assistants to go off elsewhere. So there's no news of that. I'm just kind of spitballing ideas, but we'll come back on Wednesday. We'll see if Mike Tomlin. We still don't know when Tomlin's speaking. Correct? It should be tomorrow. You would think.
I don't know exactly when it's going to be. I would think it's this week, right? Isn't it like Wednesday or Thursday generally?
Yeah, it'll be this week. I'm not entirely sure the day. It's not been announced. I know players are speaking here later today, so we'll get some of their reaction at the least for the Wednesday show.
Okay, let's see here. And we should expect future signings here this week. I think last year was on a Wednesday, the first batch of them hit after the loss to Buffalo. So we'll have some of that news. Most of those guys will come from the practice squad.
That came because that was a Wednesday. They played on a Monday, right? Because of the snowstorm. So could we even see it today, 2 days removed from?
It's possible. It's possible. I would think by Wednesday at the latest. But yeah, we could probably see it 5 minutes, obviously, after we get off this podcast here. But as soon as that hits, like I said, I've got a lot of the salary cap stuff ready to go here. I was hoping to get some futures in here and build out a true rule of 51 instead of just using fill-in salaries. But we'll see how that goes. But look for that on the site as well too. If you've stuck around the 2 hours on this show at this point here, how much is too much banging on Mike Tomlin? We want to have a hefty balance of examining, going back over and discussing the job Mike Tomlin did not only this past season, but has done in the last several seasons. The whole should he stay, should he go? Are you satisfied with how we've approached this so far? What would you like to see as far as the balance goes, as far as the Mike Tomlin talk going forward? And we're not going to please everybody. We're going to get complaints from this one. I wish you guys would move on. I wish you guys would get more on the Mike Tomlin firing train, yada, yada. But at some point, we're going to have to move past whatever decision is made here when Mike Tomlin, which seems to be that Mike Tomlin is going to stay at least another season here. So let us know which way you would like to see us go with the discussion, because the cries have never been louder for this team to move on from Mike Tomlin. So we want to try to provide the best, show content that we can with pissing off as few as people as possible, which isn't obviously always possible there. So let us know just with an email, even if it's not a question, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com at what you've heard from us so far, Mike Tomlin. If you'd like to hear more, which direction you'd kind of like this go, what other questions maybe you have about Mike Tomlin and the future of the Steelers, yada, yada. All right. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter/X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button, upper right navigational bar. Also, if you like, ad-free version, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button. Follow those directions. In the meantime, until Wednesday, and remember, we got a live stream tonight on Alex Kozora's YouTube channel starting at 7 Eastern ahead of Monday Night Football. Until Wednesday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.